All right, guys, we just wrapped up the Week 5 slate of games last night with one of the better primetime games of the season. So as of now, Week 5, you guys know the drill. We're recapping studs, duds, what that means for future outlook of the season. And as always, as those injuries start to mount up, a very, very crucial waiver wire section today. So as always, like the video, drop a comment down below, hit that subscribe button right there, and cue the intro. Welcome back into TwinTakes Fantasy Football, and oh my, how things in the NFL can flip on their head in as little as 2 weeks. So much drama, so much tumult going on in the NFL right now, so we have a jam-packed Week 5 recap to get into. So without further ado, let's jump into the headlines, and obviously what's on the forefront of everyone's mind, what the actual heck do you do with Taysom Hill? He's a tight end designation, but he's definitely not a tight end. He's caught, I think, one pass this entire season, and he definitely screwed some people out of some wins this week. I know I was one of them who's on the receiving end of the Taysom Hill experience. So what do we do? This is a guy that has a designation as a tight end. He's been a quarterback. I believe he was even a running back about 3 or 4 years ago. But he's just so unique when it comes to the fantasy landscape. He runs the ball. He lines up in the Wildcat. He's a punt returner. He is active on special teams. He had a fumble recovery this past weekend. He does not fit cleanly into what we are typically expecting as far as a fantasy position. So that's why we've had so many discussions around Taysom Hill over the past 3 years, especially, and it always happens after he has like this major blow-up game where he comes in relief of a quarterback and he takes snaps from under center, but he's not has the quarterback designation. So the way I always play it out to be is that as long as you're playing within the bounds of the platform that you're on, whether it's ESPN, Sleeper, or Yahoo, or another platform, then it's okay. ESPN has him as a tight end designation, and even though he's played as a tight end against me, I am okay with that. He's not normally going to be having this incredible workload. I mean, if we look through weeks 1 through 4, I don't think he got into double digits once that week. Yeah, he lined up in the Wildcat a few times. He had, I think, 2 rushing touchdowns on the year so far. But with Jameis under center, Dennis Allen takes a massively different approach to the way he orchestrates that Saints offense. So I don't know if this is going to be consistent going forward. Obviously, they had success against the Seahawks and they pulled out that W. So maybe they do heavily involve Taysom Hill going forward. So my 2 thoughts on it is I think at some point he will be updated to a running back designation. I think that's where, despite the fact that he doesn't cleanly fit into any role, the way that he utilizes the ball, that he's had 3 rushing touchdowns this past weekend, plus that plus the passing touchdown to Adam Troutman, I think running back would align mostly with what he does. He's not taking snaps. He's not the main quarterback, so I don't know. I don't think the quarterback designation would be fair to him. But also, it's up to your commissioner to do what he thinks or she thinks is in the best interest of the league. Hopefully, your commissioner is a fair person. Me personally, I think that whoever played on a tight end, you got a week. There's always going to be some of those players that are cheat codes at the position. Look at running quarterbacks, pass catching running backs, obviously not to the degree that Taysom Hill is, being a positional advantage at tight end, but there's always going to be some of those players that are always utilized because they're just athletes. They're not position specific, they're just athletes, and taking advantage of those guys and calling your shot on them is going to always pay off. So I allow whatever the designation is within the platform. I'm okay with it. However, it's a discussion for you to have with your league mates and your commissioner to see what they think is fair and to continue to play the game. As far as what the league mostly agrees upon, fantasy football is not something to get mad about. It is a game. It is for fun. It's something to do with your friends. So at the end of the day, it's just whatever makes the most sense and makes not generally the most people happy, because people who don't have them obviously aren't going to be happy. But what people think is the most fair. Moving on to Packers drama, that was a absolutely brutal loss at the hands of the New York Giants this past week. And I don't know what is going on with the Packers. It seems that on paper they have this incredible defense. They still have the back-to-back MVP in Aaron Rodgers, but there's something to be said with the way that media storms and just media frenzy and drama impacts play on the field. I mean, we had Aaron Rodgers hint at retirement because of how poorly his rookie wide receivers are playing. I mean, That doesn't seem healthy, in my opinion. It seems like he doesn't really have control of the locker room. Again, I'm not in the locker room. I'm just, some moron talking about fake football on YouTube. But in my personal opinion, that's not something that's going to endear yourself to a locker room, especially one with a lot of younger players. He obviously had the whole immunization versus vaccination thing last year. He had the ayahuasca scandal this past year. It's just so much going on with the Packers that I think the off-field is really distracting from the on-field. And I don't think they're the powerhouse that they were in these past seasons. I don't think they're going to be relied upon as these past seasons. Obviously, people like Geno Smith are consistently in my starting lineup over Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, we're going to talk about some of the pieces here and some of the dud sections coming up later because there was no studs from the Packers. But, do I really feel confident starting these Packers running backs going forward? I don't know. So yeah, it's something definitely to pay attention to. Definitely not auto starts from the Packers as we've been accustomed to in years past. It's going to have to be analyzed on a week by week basis. The number 3 headline I want to talk about is this is the first week of bye weeks. Now, obviously, there is no one size fits all for fantasy. There's no, okay, you have to trade after week 1. You should never trade after week 1. There's so much nuance to how people manage their teams and what you think is good, injuries, that sort of stuff. But this is why I personally prefer to wait to trade until, week 7 or 8, just because obviously everyone has all of their pieces and assets to utilize in weeks 1 through 5. I mean, you could be looking at like, oh wow, like I don't even know what to do with these extra guys on my bench because I can package them for a better guy. But there's plenty of injuries coming. Look at Rashad Penny, look at Javonte Williams, just to name 2 off the top of my head. Look at bye weeks incoming. So it takes a while to address injuries, to address bye weeks, see and analyze the actual depth of your team, see what pieces are expendable and which ones are going to be necessary for you to maintain your production and maintain your team throughout these bye weeks. So now that we have the bye weeks, then we can actually now analyze what our depth actually looks like, if we have extra pieces to package in a trade, if we need to go out and acquire some more pieces to maintain relevancy when it comes to competition. So again, everything's with nuance, but this coming few weeks, 6, 7, 8, and even into 9 should give you an idea of how deep your team truly is, and then you can start planning some trades around that. Lastly, another team where just off-field stuff is going to continue to impact them is going to be the Dolphins. I mean, this is a team that was ranked number 3 in the NFL coming off of their week 3 win over the Bills, and now who even knows what to do with them? Obviously, it starts with the front office and the entire tampering scandal from this past season. And obviously, there's still a Brian Flores lawsuit to deal with. They lost their draft picks going forward. And now we have the whole concussion thing around Tua. I mean, it's even super concerning the fact that the doctor on which the movie Concussion was based out came out and said, hey, Tua, you should never play in the NFL again. You should retire right now after how bad that hit was, or after that second concussion. So Tua's status in the NFL going forward is honestly very concerning and questionable. This is a defense that on paper should be a top 5 defense, but you don't know if, because of the way they've handled concussions, because of what happened with Teddy Bridgewater this past week, because of their inability, because they fired their neurologist, because they haven't really exactly taken responsibility for what's going on with Tua. They just said, oh, we trust our players. Have they lost the locker room? Has that front office or has that coaching staff, after only 5 weeks, kind of gotten away and lost trust within the locker room? And I mean, obviously, not that it always happens, but if the players don't buy into the team, you typically don't see that come out and perform well on the field going forward. And that's what we saw. They gave up a big game to the Bengals last week. 2 weeks ago, they gave up a big game to the Jets this week. So again, Waddle, I have no idea what's going on with him. He was one of my wide receivers to win your league, and I thought he was going to be a smash pick. I was super high on him after week 3, and now he's not even an auto start for me. He could be a flex maybe at this position, but there's a lot of stuff and a lot of nuance going around the Dolphins, figuring out what's actually going to happen with them in the offseason. And again, another team similar to the Packers, where I'm analyzing them on a game-by-game basis and seeing, what the vibe is around the team and who actually can be startable out of them. Because I don't think that they're as potent a fantasy team as they were a couple weeks ago. Again, how things changed in the matter of just a couple weeks. So a section that I wish I could skip, but we have to grade my guys, and I have to pay the piper, and this is not a great week for me. No A's at all. So let's get into it. I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can. Number 1, Terry McLaurin, projected for 11.6, got you 10.1. That is a C. Got you into double digits, which is, again, not going to submarine you, but definitely not going to win you a week. The process was there. Jahan Dotson was out. Antonio Gibson's utilization being down, but they ended up taking the deep shots to De'Ami Brown. So again, the process was there. The analysis actually paid out, just not for the receiver we thought I would. I mean, I personally would have thrown it to the receiver I paid $76 million to instead of the second-year fourth-round draft pick in De'Ami Brown. But what do I know? I'm not an NFL coach. But De'Ami Brown was the beneficiary of Jahan Dobson's absence, and if Terry McLaurin couldn't get it done this week, I am very concerned with his fantasy production going forward, so I'm going to stick with a C there. A.J. Dillon, I mean, this is just absolutely pitiful. He hasn't found the end zone since week 1. He only put up 3.4 fantasy points, so this is going to be an F. It has to be an F, just because I don't understand what's going on with the Packers, and it's even in their play calling. Let's forget about the off-field drama for a second. Let's talk about their play calling. You have 2 downs to get 1 yard, and you put it in Aaron Rodgers' hands and he gets 2 passes batted down. You don't think Quadzilla over there is going to get 1 yard on any of these rushes? It just doesn't make sense. Again, I'm not an NFL play caller, but it just seems that they've gotten away from what they truly believed was going to be the heart and soul of this offense. Running the ball, getting Aaron Jones in a good position to score, moving the field, and having A.J. Dillon as their closer. But obviously, there's a lot of concerns around the rookie wide receivers, their connection with Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers just does not seem locked in as he has the past 2 weeks. So yeah, that's an F. Moving on to our third graded player is Travis Etienne. He was projected for 9.2, actually surpassed it going into 12.9, but obviously not the upside week you expected against a defense as pitiful as Houston's. Going to give him a B-. Again, another week, he got you into double-digit points. I think this was his highest fantasy production so far. So again, utilization has increased, production in the offense has increased. I think it's only going to go forward, so this is actually a good sign for Travis Etienne going forward. But again, this is just a rough game all around. Trevor Lawrence played really badly. Houston has seemed to had Jacksonville's number over the past years. It's one of those things where Saints always beat the Buccaneers. Jags always seem to have the Colts numbers, and apparently Houston has won 9 straight games versus the Jags, so maybe it's just the NFL gods coming down and smiting them and saying, no, you will not do anything against Houston, despite how bad their defense is. But meh grade this week, but again, positive takeaway going forward. Number 4, Derek Carr. Basically nailed his projection. 17.7 projected points, finished it with 17.9. That's going to be a C right on the dot. I mean, that's what you wanted. That's what you gave you. You could argue it to go into a C plus a little bit, maybe because there was a lot of quarterbacks that really let you down this week. Didn't even reach 15 fantasy points, but they played well, just like we thought they would. This is a team that was designed to compete with Kansas City. They played them tough. They kept it close. They got out to an early lead. They sacrificed the lead, but they utilized their weapons. Having Hunter Renfrow back seems to be really, really good for Derek Carr. And despite not having Darren Waller, having being ruled out to an hamstring injury, Hunter Renfrow made some pretty clutch plays. Devontae Adams looked to be back to the top 2 wide receiver. But, Josh Jacobs is going to be the running back position. He had another great game, and that's obviously going to take away points from Derek Carr. I think at this point, it just gives you assurance that after the first few rough weeks for the Raiders, that they might be turning things around. Their offense might be clicking now, and this can give you a little bit of confidence as Derek Carr is a streamer going forward. But, 17.9, I don't think you can complain with that if you're looking for a better option than Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson at this point. Last but not least, our highest grade is going to be Devonte Smith, projected at 10.5. Came away with 13.7. That's going to be a B+. The Eagles are good. It's just there's so many mouths to feed in that offense that you can't consistently project who's going to get the production week in and week out. There's a lot of players on that offense that are, they're really great for the Eagles. A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders, they had terrible weeks, but their performance on the field just doesn't reflect in the box score. A.J. Brown is an amazing wide receiver, probably a top 5 wide receiver in the league, and he does things that just don't appear for fantasy, but he was crucial to them getting that win this past week. So you got to start your Eagles players. With them being 5-0, being the most dynamic offense in the league, having a great schedule, they're going to get you points. It's just where they end up, who knows? But Devonte Smith definitely took advantage of that 32 ranked Arizona passing defense and put up a somewhat decent game of 13.7 points, and the highest grade we're going to have here at a B+. Again, kind of an overall average week for me. If we're going to wrap it up, Terry McLaurin, C, A.J. Dillon, F, Travis Etienne, B-, Derek Carr, C, and Devonta Smith, B+. Again, average, kind of but that's not going to win you a week. I mean, this is why we draft Jalen Waddle over Deontay Johnson, or why we draft DK Metcalf over Terry McLaurin. These guys all have safe floors, and they're going to get you good points week in, week out. But we want those guys that are going to win you a week, that are going to go off and absolutely smash for your team. And again, these are all guys that gave you good baselines, put you in a position to win, but you hopefully had other pieces to help you win. And no A's is very, very frustrating for me this week. So let's talk about studs. And finally, we got to retire some of these guys. We can't just keep talking about the same guys week in and week out and be like, wow, this guy's good at football. Who knew? There's really not much more analysis to say. And that's what we got to talk about with our first guy. Josh Allen, clearly the MVP front runner, absolutely tore up the Steelers defense, 35.2 fantasy points, quarterback 1 in the week, has not dipped below quarterback 5 in the first 5 weeks. He's just good at football. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? He's the MVP front runner. He's an amazing dual threat athlete, and has this Bills offense turning to levels that we have yet to see. So 35 points. I mean, this is expected. He's been in this league, in this list every single week. Moving on to number 2, our tight end cheat code in Taysom Hill. He got you 34.1 points. Again, I don't know if he's going to continue that tight end designation, but if you played him this week, if you took that risk, he absolutely paid off for you, especially if Andy Dalton is starting. You can definitely continue to have Taysom Hill, the Wildcat, be running in the end zone, count on a rushing touchdown or so every week. 34.1 points definitely was a cheat code and helped you win. He's just a tremendous athlete. No one knows really how to classify him, which is going to lead to a lot of fantasy discourse. But again, 34.1 points is absolute amazing fantasy week. Austin Eckler, 33.9 points, running back 1 on the week. This is what we were expecting when you drafted him top 5 overall, especially with Keenan Allen out. Mike Williams did not take that step that a lot of people thought he was going to take in the offseason. We have the injury to Jalen Guyton with the torn ACL. I mean, there's so many injury concerns on this offense that they have to run it through someone. And Austin Eckler, this is the same guy we saw get 20 touchdowns in totality over the course of last season. He is an absolute touchdown monster. Found the end zone twice again this past week. Is absolutely tremendous from the pass catching standpoint, and provides you these major upside weeks of 33.9 points. And again, as long as we're seeing Keenan continue to deal with injury, I think the connection with Justin Herbert is there for him to propel you to wins week in and week out. Gabe Davis, 30.6 points. This is a tremendous week. However, the consistency is not there. He received these 30.6 fantasy points on 3 catches for 2 touchdowns on 150 plus yards. We look at Stefan Diggs, who's also going to be a stud here. He had 20.2 points, but he did it on a lot more catches, which is a larger target share. And that performance is consistent and is transferable to future fantasy production. You're not going to always see, I guarantee you will not see three catches turn into 30.6 fantasy points again this season. I will bet any amount of money on that. So that's why a lot of people sat Gabe Davis, because he was just being really consistent up until this point. And why a lot of people are now crying because they see 30.6 fantasy points on their bench and they probably could have won them a week. But again, he's super talented, is a yak monster. Again, any asset in that Bills offense has the potential to go off on any week in and week out, but this is going to just kind of confuse people, and hopefully he does, start to garner a larger target share, so that consistency then becomes for Gabe Davis, and people will have more faith in starting him. Last stat I want to highlight here is going to be Leonard Fournette. Another week where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really got away from the run game. They decided to just utilize the passing game. That's where Leonard Fournette really made his mark, found the end zone on 2 passes. Yet again, there's still questions with Chris Godwin. He definitely is still struggling with that hamstring injury. Julio Jones is not even close to 50%. I mean, he looks like a shell of himself out there. Cole Beasley retired, and there's just not really much else going on around Leonard Fournette. So he is going to be the main guy for Tom Brady. Tom Brady excels in that 5 to 10 yard passing range, and that's where Leonard Fournette, he gets his dump offs and he takes them to the house, and he gets 5-6 churns yards, figures out those shortened distance to the end zone. And obviously it's working for them, and they got away from the run, but it still is not detrimental to Leonard Fournette as he ends up with 30.9 fantasy points. Other guys I want to mention here in the studs: Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, 25.1 points and 24.3 points respectively. I mean, this is what you want for fantasy football. The Vikings love fantasy football players because they have 2 tremendous athletes in Dalvin and Jefferson, and they just target them and they hyper target them, and they don't get cute. They don't use any other players, and it's consistent fantasy production week in, week out. This is why Dalvin and Jefferson were first round picks, because they put up over 20 plus fantasy points, even in pretty average performances. Tyler Lockett, 24.9 points. I mean, Geno is the highest rated passing QB so far in the year. He has the number 1 QBR, absolutely killing it as far as no one predicted this coming out of this Seattle Seahawks defense, but DK is still good. Tyler Lockett is having a career renaissance, 24.9 points. Those throws he had, that one throw he had to Tyler Lockett for the touchdown was an absolute dime by Geno Smith. And if they continue to play at this level, I think Tyler Lockett and DK Smith are absolute steals where you got them in the draft and should be continuing to play. Tyler Lockett's great. Nick Chubb, 25.4 points. I can't keep talking. He's the best runner in the NFL. What else do you want me to say? He's good, finds the end zone every single week. He's the heart and soul of that Browns offense. He's going to be here, and I have to retire him because I can't. No one's going to be like, wow, good job. You said Nick Chubb was a stud. What else is new? Rain is wet and sugar is sweet. Riveting news. Breece Hall, 26.7 points. This is his breakout. We saw this could have been even higher because he got 2 runs down to the 1 yard line, and then they ended up giving those touches to Michael Carter. So it just looks like this is the dynamic pass catching back that we wanted in the draft, that people were projecting to go pretty high overall. Potential first round talent, and this should be the breakout. This is hopefully a sign of things to come. Has a really good rapport with Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson seems to be getting more and more comfortable. They torched a good, at least on paper, a good Miami defense, and seems like Robert Saleh is big into the run game. Surprise, surprise, coming from the Kyle Shanahan system. Jalen Hurts, another guy, good week in, week out, fantasy MVP, 27.7 points, leading the 5-0 Eagles. Alvin Kamara, thank God, because we would have to put the panic button on Alvin if he had not produced for fantasy this week. And this is why you draft Alvin Kamara so high. His ability to get you over 20 fantasy points and not even finding the end zone. He's such a dynamic pass catching threat. And especially with Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry suffering injuries, I think he'll be heavily utilized going forward. In that same vein, we have CMC with 19.9 points and Cooper Kupp with 22.4 points. Again, these are why these guys were top 5 draft picks. They get you these amazing points without even finding the end zone. They're so dynamic. They command such a high target share that without even finding the end zone, they're giving you 20 plus fantasy points, and they're the safest floor in fantasy right now. Jacoby Myers is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He had 20.6 points this week, especially even with rookie QB and Bailey Zappi throwing him the ball. He just doesn't seem to find the end zone, which has really hurt his value, but he's very, very consistent, does quite a bit for that Patriots offense. I don't know how consistent he'll be going forward, but if you have him, definitely during the bye weeks and definitely when injuries start to mount up, I think he's a great flex option. Derrick Henry is also just really good at football. He is a god amongst men, both in physical stature and in the way he runs the ball. 26.2 points, found the end zone twice. He's just really good, and without any wide receiver establishing themselves in that Titans offense, the Titans will go as Derrick Henry goes, and he's going to see a massive target share or massive opportunity share in that offense. Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, they're the 1 and 2 tight ends for a reason. They're both really good. They're both the dominant pass catcher, the number 1 option in each of their respective offenses. Travis Kelce had an insane game, catching 4 touchdowns, and that's just what you expect when you have Patrick Mahomes, the best QB in my opinion, Lamar Jackson, the second best QB in my opinion, and you have the 2 tight ends. It's going to be just hopefully magic like this week in and week out. Devonta Adams and Josh Jacobs finally put up, again, we talked about how with the my guy section, Derek Carr seems like after a couple rough weeks to start, Josh McDaniels has started to settle in. Things are kind of going a little bit better. Devontae Adams looked to be the number 1 wide receiver that he has been in years past. Josh Jacobs is getting heavily involved. And Devontae getting 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs also finding the end zone. So 25 points for Devontae, 27 points for Josh Jacobs. Looking to be fantastic for fantasy going forward. And hopefully, the Raiders can build off the success despite the disappointing loss, despite an impending suspension probably for Devontae Adams. They can build off this and hopefully have a second half surge and be good for fantasy. So those are the studs. Let's talk about the duds here. And Naji Harris is one of the most concerning duds that we have to talk about. Only 5.1 points, has yet to exceed 11 points on the year. The whole Steelers offense looks absolutely abysmal. And Najee's current schedule is against some of the best defenses in the league. This is not unexpected going against the Bills defense, but you would have hoped that he could at least work in some passing ability and also just run the ball through the tackles, break some tackles, neither of which he could do. He had a lower target share than Jalen Warren, and he barely broke any tackles. So I'm tremendously concerned for Najee Harris until that offensive line gets better, until Kenny Pickett seems to find his mojo. Obviously, it was a bad first game to start against the Bills, but Najee Harris is probably a bench candidate until he figures it out. Amon-Ra St. Brown here, and we can talk about Amon-Ra, we can talk about Jamal Williams, Jared Goff, TJ Hawkinson all as well. This is just a game that Bill Belichick seemed to have the Lions number. They couldn't get a single thing going on offense. They goosed as far as the entirety of the points goes. I'm not super concerned. They're still one of the more exciting teams for fantasy football. It just was one of those really, really off games. And Bill Belichick just always seems to have Goff's number, whether it's in the Super Bowl a few years ago or when he was with the Rams or with the Lions. Amon-Ra is still super talented. Jamal Williams is still a must start as long as DeAndre Swift is out. TJ Hawkinson is the only one that I think, probably that last week was a little bit of an aberration. Don't worry about TJ Hawkinson going forward. T. Higgins. This was absolutely brutal because in the same vein as Alvin Kamara, there was no real indication that he was going to sit out for the entire game, that he was going to be utilized. Zach Taylor came out and said, yeah, there's special situations and passing downs that we could see T. Higgins being utilized for, but I don't know if this is being super conservative as far as concussions go or what's going on with T. Higgins, but coming out there goosing, not being used at all, especially in a really, really close divisional game against the Ravens, is absolutely brutal. He's been the wide receiver one on that team as far as points goes, over Jamar Chase, and he has really benefited from the fact that a lot of coverages are focusing on Jamar Chase, and he was just a great wide receiver, and have this come out and goose you is just absolutely really bad. Garrett Wilson, 4.2 fantasy points. This is a little bit concerning just because, if the Jets are putting up 40 points and Garrett Wilson ends up with 4.2, like, what does that say about their faith in the passing game? Obviously, this is going to be a run-first team, having both Michael Carter and Breece Hall, but this was again second game for Zach Wilson under center. It's going to take for some time for him to develop. It will be okay. Again, this was a very, very positive game script for the run game. They got out ahead early and they just continued to absolutely obliterate the Dolphins. So there really wasn't even need to throw the ball. I think Garrett Wilson's super talented. I think he has a good rapport with Zach Wilson, and I think going forward shouldn't be any concern. Finally, AJ Brown, same vein that we talked about with Devonta Smith. Again, the things that A.J. Brown does for that offense will not reflect on the fantasy box score. He was an absolute dominant wide receiver. He looked really, really good. He was doing things all over the field to help out the Eagles. He didn't get the catches, didn't get the targets his way, and the Eagles still won. So again, this is a good Eagles team. You can't sit your starters, but there's just so many mouths to feed between Goddard, Sanders, Hurts, Devonta, AJ, that you don't know who's going to get the production week in and week out. But their potential is there for him to go off. He's had 20-point weeks. Honorable mention in the dud section is J.K. Dobbins. That was just disappointing. I don't know what happened in that Bengals game, except for that Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson were really disruptive in the backfield. Also led to a pretty poor game from Lamar as well. Devin Singletary, again, a game that, being up 38, winning 38-3 over Steelers, you would have thought it was a very positive game script for the running back, but again, we always forget the number one running back on that team is Josh Allen, and so they didn't seem to really need to utilize Devin Singletary going forward. Jalen Waddle, again, another really bad fantasy performance. He doesn't look to be 100% from that groin injury. We'll have to pay attention to what the practice and injury reports look like this week, see if he comes back to full health. Tyreek Hill did leave in a walking boot, so that might open up some opportunity for Jalen Waddle going forward, but if Skylar Thompson's throwing the ball, I think Jalen Waddle is a must-sit just because with Mike McDaniels, he's going to run the ball if you have an undrafted rookie in at quarterback. James Robinson, this is just a really bad game from him. I'm not really sure what happened. Again, this was supposed to be a smash play against the Houston's defense. That was the worst-ranked run defense in the league. Only 4.9 points is absolutely frustrating if you have been relying on James Robinson. But again, just, Texans seem to have the Jaguars number, and I still would not lose faith in James Robinson. Another Robinson who I have lost faith in is Allen Robinson. He is going to be on the permanently retire from the duds list. I can't keep talking about this guy as he doesn't get any targets. He looks terrible on the field. He doesn't seem motivated. He's not getting open. He's not creating separation. And he can't catch the balls that are thrown his way. 2.7 points. Apparently last season was not an aberration. This is just what we should expect from Allen Robinson going forward. Elijah Moore, similar to the Garrett Wilson conversation, but he's even worse. He has 1.6 points. Again, I think it's going to take time for that passing to develop. It wasn't a very positive game script for the passing. I wouldn't be starting Elijah Moore, but, as the season progresses, as Zach Wilson becomes more comfortable on offense, I think he does have the opportunity for the upside. So just sit him on your bench. Don't drop him. Just keep him there. Dalton Schultz, go ahead and drop him. He apparently has zero relevance to the Dallas offense. Goosed yet again. Chase Edmonds had one run for 1 yard, had 2 targets through the air, dropped both of them. Doesn't drop both of them, just didn't catch either of them. He's droppable. Raheem Mostert is the guy going forward. I'm not messing around with Chase Edmonds anymore. Let someone else pick him up and deal with him. Even if he gets a couple goal line runs, not worth it for me to deal with that headache week in, week out. A.J. Dillon, we talked about how frustrating this Packers offense is, and until we see some material change, I'm only going to play him in plus matchups. Damian Harris, obviously, the injury led to his really poor performance in 1.7 points. Ramondre Stevenson looks to be the lead back going forward. Damian Harris is going to be a bench candidate and only playable if Ramondre gets hurt. Brandon Cooks, a guy who I thought was a really safe floor. Davis Mills just hasn't looked like he has the juice. He hasn't taken that second-year step, not leading the offense like he showed flashes of in his rookie year. That offense seems to be running through Dameon Pierce, and why wouldn't he? He's insane as a running back. He's the best rookie running back and just absolutely dynamic. He's top 5 in yards, I believe, after being stifled even the first 2 weeks. So obviously that's to the detriment of Brandon Cooks. I don't know how confident I am starting him going forward. And James Conner, we'll talk about this in the waiver wire pickups, but he still is dealing with injury. There still doesn't seem to be many confidence in their running backs. He's not being heavily utilized in the passing game like we thought he would, especially with Rondale and DeAndre Hopkins out. But we'll talk about what I think about that going forward when we talk about a waiver wire pickup. Christian Kirk, again, just with Trevor Lawrence looking really bad, that's the game you're going to get with Christian Kirk. It's kind of dependent on the quarterback. I don't think that's indicative of Trevor Lawrence's ability. I think he's a great quarterback, and he should bounce back pretty soon. And finally, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Competitive game, it just wasn't a game that favored him. Obviously, all the targets went to Travis Kelce. He was utilized. He had a couple passes. I think he had 3 catches for 20 yards on the ground. Was running the ball quite a bit, but the Raiders' defensive line actually stepped up pretty well and put them in a negative game script. So Patrick Mahomes was passing the ball quite a bit. Patrick Mahomes did have 30.5 fantasy points, so he was also just tremendous. And just didn't lead to a positive game script for Clyde to do any work on the ground. So let's figure it out here. Waiver wires. Lots of injuries to talk about. Lots of bye weeks to talk about. This is going to be one of the most critical waiver wires we've talked about all week. So let's get into the first one. It's going to be Kenneth Walker III. Again, this is one of the top 10 offenses of Seattle Seahawks. Who thought we'd be saying that coming into week 5 of 2022, but this is a top 10 offense here. Rashad Penny goes down with a broken fibula. He's out for the season. Kenneth Walker looked really, really dominant on the ground, had a 69-yard TD run, is one of the best pure runners coming out of this past draft class. Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. They look like Charles Cross is settling in. The offensive line is gelling a little bit. Geno Smith flinging the ball all over the field and opening up the running lanes is definitely helping Kenneth Walker. So if he's on your waiver wire, you must pick him up. And I'm tired of people saying Kenneth Walker, like, oh, if Kenneth Walker's on your waiver wire, what 4-team league are you in that I can join? Come on, guys. No one plays with like 10 bench spots or 8 bench spots. Me personally, for the leagues that I run, I shorten it to about 6 bench spots, and that basically means that you have to continue to move players in and out of your lineup that you can start on a week-to-week basis. It forces people to drop guys that they don't think are going to score, and it just forces a lot more active management of your roster. And just with the way Kenneth Walker had been trending with the first few weeks, if you have a shorter bench, which I advocate for because it makes for a more engaging fantasy football play, then he probably will be on your bench this week. Number 2 is going to be Brian Robinson. He had triple the amount of carries that Antonio Gibson does. Clearly is a guy that Ron Rivera has a ton of faith in and should be their workforce or the workhorse going forward in this offense. I understand he only ended up with 2.8 fantasy points this week, but again, this is a guy that you want to get out ahead of. These running backs, you want to kind of pick him up a week or two early. So pick up Brian Robinson. I wouldn't start him, but just stash him on your bench, and he should come into his own as the season progresses and he comes back a little bit more from that leg injury. Number 3 is going to be Hayden Hurst. Tight ends have been absolutely brutal to deal with this year. I mean, we have guys like Dalton Schultz, Dawson Knox, Cole Kmet, who guys were drafted, tight end 6, 7, 8, and then now they're just, absolutely gooses on the season and have zero impact as far as fantasy. But Hayden Hurst looks to be heavily utilized in that Bengals offense, especially with the T. Higgins injury. I think Tyler Boyd also limped off the field at one point, so he's a little banged up. Hayden Hurst, we see Joe Burrow does like to utilize his tight ends, even going back to his college days. CJ Uzomah had tremendous production last year in a few games, and Hayden Hurst just seems to already have that connection built with Joe Burrow, and he's doing well. And as a flyer tight end to pick up off the waiver wire, he's a guy that I would definitely trust something over like a Cole Kmet or Dalton Schultz at this point. I think he has a touchdown upside. I think he has the target volume to sustain fantasy production of the tight end and get you 8, 9, 10 points, which is what you really want from tight ends. Number 4 waiver wire that you must pick up is going to be Alec Pierce. We saw just how abysmal the Colts offenses when they tried to run it through solely Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman. Very easy for defenses to diagnose. And defense was double covering Michael Pittman. They were stacking the box against Jonathan Taylor, and they needed it in the Colts and Frank Reich really needed to figure out a different option. They went through the tight ends in Jelani Woods and Mo Ali Cox, but again, I don't think either of them are talented enough to sustain production year over year. This is where they bring in Alec Pierce. He had a really good game. I know Jonathan Taylor was out, but Alec Pierce got a massive target share. I believe had 9 catches or something ridiculous like that. Really opened up the field, allowed for more offense to be had all over the field by the Colts. And if they want to get back into this division, it's still a division that they can win in the AFC South, being the worst division of football. They need to really find a true third option outside of Taylor and Pittman. And the guy to look at that going forward is going to be Alec Pierce. And hopefully this is a sign of things to come, despite not being a great game, but should be something that, Alec Pierce can find the end zone a few times going forward. Last waiver I want to talk about is Benjamin. James Conner, not 100% healthy. Damian Williams left the game early with an injury. Don't know how long he'll be out for. Seemed to be pretty good coming in relief for both of those guys. Got it done on the ground, got it done through the air. With DeAndre Hopkins coming back soon, Rondale Moore now back in the fold, should open up the run game for whichever running back is there for the Cardinals. And I think, Benjamin showed some juice and should be a guy definitely on your waiver wire list this week. This is one of the more strong waiver wires that I've talked about. We've joked about the waiver wire being kind of dry up until this point, but these are 5 guys that I'm targeting in all my leagues, basically dropping my entire bench to pick up these 5 guys. I think they're going to be heavily utilized going forward. So Kenneth Walker, Brian Robinson, Hayden Hurst, Alec Pierce, Benjamin. All right. That's going to wrap it up for the Week 5 recap. Hopefully you guys fared better. Hopefully you didn't have to face the cheat code in Taysom Hill like I did. And you know what? I'll see you in 2 days to regroup and prep for Week 6, where we start to have to deal with buys. Take care.